Hi everyone, my name is Ibreez Ajaz and I currently work as an internal medicine trainee in the United Kingdom. This is probably our most requested and long-awaited video. So if you are a medical student or an intern, or perhaps you're just wondering what your options are abroad, let's start talking about the difference between PLAB and USMLE. So PLAB is the Professional and Linguistics Assessment Board, and it's with this exam upon completion that you can apply for GMC registration, which would allow you to work in the United Kingdom as a doctor. The USMLE is the United States Medical Licensing Exam, and this exam, upon completion, would allow you to apply for the match, which would then get you into residency. While we're talking about PLAB today, PLAB is not the only way that you can get GMC registration. If you're interested in knowing about all the other ways that you can get GMC registration and work in the UK, please check out our video about how to work in the UK as a doctor. For the USMLE, however, it is the only way that you can work in the United States as a doctor. You must complete the USMLE in order to progress and work as a doctor in the United States. For PLAB, you must first complete an English proficiency exam before you can take PLAB 1. This exam may be the IELTS or the OET. Now you can take the IELTS or OET at any time you want, but it has a 2-year validity, and you need to keep in mind that you can only take PLAB 1 after you've completed your final medical exam and you've passed your final medical exam. So you need to be done with med school before you can take PLAB. You need to also keep in mind that you have to take PLAB 1 before you can take PLAB 2. You cannot take PLAB 2 and then take PLAB 1. For the USMLE, you're allowed to take it during medical school, but for the USMLE, you can take Step 2 before you take Step 1, but you don't need to worry about any sort of English proficiency exams. So for PLAB, you have to take PLAB 1 and PLAB 2. PLAB 1 consists of 180 multiple choice based questions that is written, so you'd have to bubble in your answers on like a Scantron type form. PLAB 2 typically consists of 18 stations that is in a OSCE type situation. For USMLE, you have Step 1, Step 2 CK or clinical knowledge, Step 2 CS or clinical skills, and Step 3. Step 1 consists of an exam that you have to take on a computer with a multiple choice based format. Step 2 CK is also in a computer based multiple choice format, but Step 2 CS, the clinical skills exam, is like the PLAB 2 in that it is a OSCE setting type exam. And then finally, Step 3 is again a computer-based multiple choice question assessment. So another really common question that people want to know before they embark on either PLAB or USMLE is they want to know which exam is easier. So based on my personal experience, I found that PLAB is a considerably easier exam than the USMLE, but that does not mean that you should take the PLAB exam lightly. There is a minimum score for PLAB that you have to attain in order to pass. But after you get the minimum required score to pass in your PLAB exam, you don't need to worry about those scores anymore. They have no sort of effect on your GMC registration or your applications later on for jobs or for training. However, for USMLE, your scores are important when you want to go then apply for the match or for your residency, especially if you want to apply for more competitive specialties which require a higher score. Now that we've already talked about the difficulties of the exams, obviously you'd want to know how you can prepare and how much time it would take to prepare. So for PLAB, considering that you have to take an English proficiency exam first, either IELTS or OET, then PLAB 1 and PLAB 2, we typically give a range of about 8 to 12 months to prepare for these exams. If you are otherwise pretty confident in your English abilities, it may not take you that long to take IELTS or OET. But you have to wait for certain times of the year for the PLAB exam anyway, so that's why we try and give a comfortable range of about 8 to 12 months, but that doesn't mean you can't do it in 6 months, or it might take you a little bit longer. For USMLE, again, because this exam is a little bit more difficult than the PLAB, and then you also have to wait for certain times of the year for the exam, and then of course you want to make sure you are fully prepared. We say it takes about 2 to 4 years to really feel confident and prepare for all parts of Step 1, Step 2 CS, Step 2 CK, and then of course Step 3. But that doesn't mean you couldn't get it done unless, or if you need more time, you would need more time. If we want to talk about the number of attempts that you can take for PLAB 1 and PLAB 2 respectively, you can take each exam 4 times. After the 4th time, you have to appeal to GMC or the General Medical Council, which is the medical regulatory board in the United Kingdom. And if they allow your appeal, then you can take it for a 5th time, but you cannot take it more than that. For validity for PLAB, you have to take PLAB 1 first. You cannot take PLAB 2 before PLAB 1, as I mentioned before, and you must complete your PLAB 2 within 2 years because PLAB 1 only has a 2-year validity. If your PLAB 1 expires, you must retake PLAB 1 before you can sit for PLAB 2. You must also apply for your GMC registration within 2 years of passing PLAB 2. If by the time you apply for GMC registration, your PLAB 1 has expired, as in that 2-year validity has gone by, it's okay because you have a valid PLAB 2. For the USMLE, you have to basically complete the exam within a 7-year period. So because you don't necessarily have to take step 1 first, if you take step 1 or step 2 first, whatever the first exam is that you take, from that day you have 7 years to complete all parts of the steps. If you have not completed all parts of the steps within that 7-year validity, then your first one is no longer valid. Please also keep in mind that you only have 6 chances to take the USMLE. Let's now talk about the exam fees and the associated costs along the way. I just want to put in a quick disclaimer that I'm not going to be talking about any cost for visa, any cost for traveling, rent, utilities, food, or for whatever other kind of extra costs associated with the whole journey, aside from what I've mentioned here, because I thought that would give too much of a variance in the range. So this is kind of my slimmed down range of the exam fees and then of course the associated costs. So for PLAB, so if you decide to take IELTS, you'll have to pay about £160, British pounds, and if you decide to take OET, it'll cost you about £332. For PLAB 1, it'll cost you £239, and PLAB 2 will cost you £875. You'll also need to get EPIC verification done of your primary medical qualification or your medical degree, which will cost you £215. Upon completion of all of this and successfully passing the PLAB exam, you will apply for GMC registration. If you have cleared your medical school within the last 5 years upon your application for GMC registration, you have to pay £156. But if it's been more than 5 years since you've passed medical school and then you are applying for GMC registration, your fee would then be £406. So if I kind of wanted to give a range based on what I've said, we're going to start on this side with an individual who's decided to take IELTS and has passed within 5 years. They can expect their cost in this setting to be £1,645, with a range to an individual who has taken OET, but it's been more than 5 years since they've graduated, and they would be looking at about £2,067. So if I had to, again, give that kind of a rough estimate, you're looking at about £1,600 to £2,000 just for the exam and associated fees for PLAB. For USMLE, however, we're going to do everything in US dollars. So first of all, you will want to pay for your ECFMG certification, which will cost you $145. After that, you'll want to pay for your Step 1, which will cost you $965. Step 2 CK also costs $965, while Step 2 CS will cost you $1,600. Step 3 will cost you $895. After that, what you'll want to do, obviously, is you want to apply for the match. And in order to apply for the match, you will need a token known as the ERAS token, which will cost you $130. You'll also need to establish an EPIC account as you did for PLAB, and this EPIC account will cost you $125. You'll have to verify some credentials, and per credential, you must pay $90. Now, you've done all this. Sometimes what can happen is when you want to progress with your residency, the state medical authority who is taking care of you for that residency may want some verification of your documents. If they require this verification, and it isn't always something that happens, but if they require it, it will cost you $55 to get that verification done. After that, you will want to obviously apply for the match, which will be you applying for your specialties. So typically, international medical graduates want to apply for as many appropriate programs as makes sense for them, because it gives them more of a chance to actually be selected. That doesn't mean to say you have to apply for a great number of programs. You can apply for as many as you find is appropriate for yourself, but typically IMGs apply for about 175 to 200 programs. There are costs associated with applying for these programs. If you apply for up to 10, it's $99, and then they do kind of a staggered cost system for however many more you do. So taking into that staggered cost and the other fees associated with that, if you were to apply for about 175 to 200 programs for your match, you would be spending about $4,200 to about $4,800. Okay, the 4,200 being if you apply for 175 and 4,800 being if you apply for 200. But again, this cost can depend on how many programs you decide to apply for. But we just kept it at the median range and where most international medical graduates apply. After you do that, you have to think about the National Resident Match Program, or the NRMP, which is something you must have heard of a lot if you thought about the USMLE. In order to set up an account in the NRMP, you have to pay a standard registration fee, which is $85. And then after you get your preferences, after your interview, if you want to rank those preferences, it will cost you $50 roughly to rank those preferences. But again, the cost of ranking the preferences will go up if you have more preferences to rank, which you can see fully on the NRMP website. But we've just given, for the sake of brevity, $50 as how much it'll cost you to rank your preferences. Another really important thing that you have to take into consideration when you are considering your costs for your whole USMLE pathway is, in order to have a really strong application for the match, a lot of individuals recommend international medical graduates, or as a whole, to have US clinical experience. There are things like observerships and externships and clinical experiences, and whichever one you choose to do, they typically do cost money. You may be lucky and be able to find stuff that don't cost anything at all, but the most suggested form are the clinical experiences that you can partake in. We averaged out the cost of most clinical experiences throughout the United States, and they typically cost $2,100. And it is suggested to at least have 3 months worth of these clinical experiences or observerships or externships. So if you were looking into that, you would have to pay $2,100 3 times. So a total cost of $6,300 just for that. So again, if I were to then just kind of sum all of this up with what I've talked about, from ECFMG certification all the way down to your NRMP and of course your externships, you'd be looking at about $16,205 for this part of your USMLE journey. And again, my disclaimer, this is not talking about your visa, your travel costs, flights, utilities, rent, food, any of that. It's just more about the real things that are associated with the USMLE or PLAB, be it by their exams or the associated costs. Now, going back to PLAB, you've gone ahead and you've done everything. If you've taken the PLAB route and you've gotten your GMC registration and you're like, well, now what? So, in the United Kingdom, there are 2 routes by which you can progress and proceed as a doctor. There is a non-training route and a training route. So, as a non-trainee, there are jobs available year-round on the NHS Jobs website that you can find whatever is most specific to what you want, and if you meet the specifications and job description, you can go ahead and apply year-round. You don't have to wait for a specific time of the year to apply for these jobs, and there is no cost associated with applying for these jobs. You can apply for as many jobs as you see fit. For training jobs, there are application periods, just like there are for the USMLE. Typically, these application periods are around November time, but it can vary a lot for different specialties. There is, again, no cost associated with applying for these training posts, but like I said, you have to wait for these training posts to open up. What most international medical graduates do in the United Kingdom is they'll come to the UK and work for some time as a non-training doctor, put together a portfolio, and make sure that they have the relevant competencies to then apply for a training post. That doesn't mean to say that you cannot come to the UK and directly come into a training post, but it is not usually recommended because it's a good idea to get an experience of what the UK system is like. I also want to make it very clear that if you are a non-trainee doctor in the United Kingdom versus a trainee doctor, there's no difference in who you are. You will not be treated as a lower doctor or a lesser doctor. It's just that an individual who is in a non-training position versus an individual who's in a training position, a training doctor has a structured curriculum that they must fulfill. There's a portfolio that they have to fill, and they have to show certain competencies along the way that they are fulfilling throughout their training because they're progressing towards an end point of their training. A non-training doctor is working just as the training doctor is, but there is no other associated kind of weight of, oh, I have to do this for my portfolio, or I have to get these competencies done. There is no structured training program for this individual. Please also keep in mind that both of these individuals have the same basic pay, because in the United Kingdom they have structured a kind of pay scale as per your level of working. There is no separate pay scale for if you are a trainee or a non-trainee. It is based on the level that you are working. In the United States, there is no concept of a non-training doctor. You have to wait for the match period. You have to apply for the match, interview in the match if you get called back for an interview. And then during this time, if you hear back that you've gotten a match, you've gotten into a residency, you're set into your residency, into your training, There is no concept at all of a non-training position. If unfortunately you are not successful after the match into getting into a residency, you unfortunately will have to wait until the next year and reapply for the match. And usually during that time, people try and do more externships or observerships or get research and publications done, which can, of course, add to your cost in your USMLE journey. So I just again want to make abundantly clear that in the US, if you do not match, you cannot work as a doctor until you match into a residency. But in the United Kingdom, you can work in a non-training post and then progress into training. That doesn't mean to say that you cannot get into training in the United Kingdom, that it is very difficult to get into training. But of course, you have a fallback option if you are unsuccessful in your attempts to get into training. All right, guys, so I hope the way that I've discussed about PLAB and USMLE has given you a bit of an idea. I'm not trying to sell one versus the other. I think it's just something that you should have information about so you can make that kind of decision about what's right for you. I'm not here to say that PLAB is better than USMLE or that USMLE is better than PLAB or whatever, anything like that. It's just up to you to kind of make, here are the facts, what do you want to do next? Obviously, there are more things that we could talk about in respect to PLAB and USMLE, but just for the sake of giving what I thought was the bare bones foundation of what you needed to know, this is what it is. So if you still feel that you need to know a little bit more about PLAB versus USMLE, we have an article that we've linked in the description box below that talks about it really in depth. So if you feel that there's still some information that's lacking, if you don't find that information in that article, or if you're still kind of confused, you can always comment below and we'll try and get back to you. But until next time, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks.